In this session, we're going to go deeper into how to use technology to build relationships and sell. The subtitle of this session is Building Relationships with Prospects That Lead to Sales Using Email, Audio, and Video Newsletters. So remember, most people who visit won't buy the first time. So most people who visit your website will not purchase the first time they visit. This is why we use opt-in landing pages and follow-up newsletters. Miss this point and you throw away as much as 90% of your profit and income. As much as 90%. Now, this is my own estimate of how much money I would have thrown away had I not created an email newsletter and started doing follow-ups with my very first information product, Double Your Dating. I estimate that instead of that business growing into a multi-million-dollar business, it would have grown into a multi-$100,000 business. In other words, it would have been maybe 10% or less as successful, maybe even 5%, because the more money you make, the more you can spend to grow the business. So what that's saying here is that most of your sales in your business, if you use a good follow-up sequence and if you're doing a good job, most of the sales will come either after the first visit or on the back end, after someone buys your first product and then invest in some of your back end products, buy some of your other products. So this is very critical. If you don't get this piece right, you can throw away as much as 90% of your profit and income. Life is a moving parade, right? As Jay Abraham says, life's a moving parade. It's one of his most interesting thoughts, I think. And the mindset here is to expect people to be at different points in the buying process and not expect everyone to buy from you right now. For this reason, we always follow up with newsletters and other content so we're there when our prospect is ready to buy. So stop and think for just a moment here. Okay, so let's say that you realize that you need to buy a car. Let's say that your car isn't running well, or maybe it breaks down, or maybe you're taking a new job and you're going to need a more reliable car because you're going to have a longer commute, or you're having a family and you can see that you'd like to buy a safer car than the one that you already have, or a more reliable car. There are all kinds of reasons, but the point is that you can see the idea that you need to buy a car coming over the horizon toward you. You usually don't just wake up one day and say, oh, I need to go buy a car right now, and it was the first time you thought of it. Usually there's some preparation involved. Now, someone who needs to buy a car because their family is expanding and they want a little bigger, little safer car is different from someone who takes a new job and is going to have a longer commute, is different from someone who has just gotten a promotion at work and they want to show off a little bit. Okay, these people are all at different stages of life. They're all going through different processes. But what they all have in common is they're probably going to start doing research in advance. Okay, some of these folks might start doing research 3 months in advance. Some might start 6 months, 9 months, 12 months. Some people might start 5 or 10 years in advance. Okay, I went through a phase in my life where I thought I wanted to get rich and have a lot of money and buy a Ferrari. Well, I probably looked at Ferraris and read about them for 15 or 20 years, right, learning all about them before I actually went out and bought one. Turned out that it was a pretty fun car to own and so forth, but I never drove it, and I gave it away in a contest for a product launch, which was pretty fun because I got double value out of it. But the bottom line here is that depending on who you are and where you're at in your process, you could start anywhere from weeks or months, even up to years in advance. Now, if you take 1,000 people who are all considering buying a car, and who this is the first day that they've started considering that they really need to buy a car or that they want to buy a car, and you plotted them on a graph of some kind, what you'd find is that most of them were probably somewhere like, I'm going to guess right now, but they're probably like 1 to 3 months or 3 to 6 months out on average. And then there'll be a trail off, or kind of a, a descending curve going out, months and then years into the future. But the key here is if you've got 1,000 people, since most of them are not ready to buy a car today, it makes sense that you'd want to follow up with those 1,000 people if they signed up for your email newsletter over time so that you're there when they're ready. Okay, that's why we want to follow up with newsletters, so that we're there when the prospect is ready to buy. And if you look at these 1,000 people, not like a snapshot, not something that's standing still, but like a moving parade, that some of the ones that are buying today are marching by every day, then it gives you a little bit, better picture of what you're dealing with. And it also gives you a better idea of how to address these people, how to interact with them. So remember, life is a moving parade. They're moving. These people are buying at different points. You want to keep following up with them so that when they're ready to buy, you are in front of them. Because if you're not, you're easy to forget, and they're probably not going to remember you, and they're not going to come back to buy from you. The follow-up process must add value, educate, and sell. So however you decide to follow up, it's very important to continue educating, adding value, and selling. The more you add value, the more trust you build, the more influence you have with your prospect. So we're not just following up here to talk or to connect. It's very, very important that we create lots of value, that we educate our prospects, and we sell in every one of our follow-ups. So what do we do to add value? Well, we do what we've learned in the program so far. We identify what their strongest emotional hot buttons are and the specific techniques that will be of most value to them. And then we teach them how to solve those problems. We give them techniques to create solutions, create results, give them the benefits that they want. We also want to educate them. We don't just want to educate them about the topic, we also want to educate them about our business and how we do business. So for example, let's say that someone is coming to your website because they want to learn about weight loss. We don't want to just educate them about weight loss and how it works, okay, which we do want to do, by the way. So we want to teach them about the different models of weight loss, how the body works, etc. We also want to teach them about how to choose a good weight loss coach or a good weight loss teacher, what to look for. And we also want to teach them what to look for in a method or in an exercise routine or a particular way of eating to lose weight. And we want to educate them about all of these different things, because most of the time a person who's purchasing something, whether it be a product that's a kind of a real world tangible product like a car, or whether it be an intangible informational educational product like a book or an audio program or a video program, we have to remember that these people don't understand how to value things. They don't have an education about what it is that they're buying. They typically have done a little research online, and all they've got is what they've read or what they've looked at in videos. They don't really have experience. They don't have deep knowledge and understanding. So the more we can educate them, the better, and the more that actually builds trust. And then, of course, finally, we want to sell. Okay, we want to sell to these folks. And what does selling mean? Well, it means that after we've added value, after we've educated, we want to say, if you'd like to get more of this kind of stuff, and if you'd like to solve your problem and get the result that you want, and we want to say what those specific things are, then come to my website and buy my product. Okay? Or go watch this video that happens to be an educational video that also has a close at the end. In other words, we want to motivate them to go and take action to buy what we're selling. Okay? So we're not just adding value, we're not just educating, we're also selling. And as a rule of thumb, the more value you add and the more trust you build, the more influence you have with your prospect. So the more you add value, the more you educate them, the more you build trust over time, the more influence you're going to have when you ask them to go and buy. Okay, so all of these pieces work together to make one puzzle. All of these ingredients go together to make one dish. We're trying to build a business here. We're not just trying to offer a bunch of interesting information or trivia to people. And this is the way that it goes together. Now, the main channels of communication are print, audio, and video. This is where you're going to be investing probably 80 or 90% of your effort communicating with your customers. And these correspond with the basic senses. Okay, so we've got the auditory or audio, we've got the visual or video, which usually includes some audio. And then we've got print, which is a little bit more abstract, but it's words on a page typically that we can read. And, you know, obviously there's some overlap here, but these are really the three main kind of formats of media. Your follow-up system can be print, audio, or video in the form of email newsletters, blog posts, podcasts, videos, or any combination. Add social media tweets and updates to direct people to your new content as well. One of the things we want to do is we want to get as much value as we can out of every piece of content that we create, out of every newsletter, et cetera, et cetera. And we'll talk about how to do that in a moment here. The key is that each of your follow-up pieces needs to be able to stand alone. So we learned about kind of modularizing and serializing our content earlier in this program. We learned about creating complete concepts where a blog post or an email newsletter or a little video can stand on its own. So that if someone reads it, they don't necessarily have to have read all of the others. Okay? It may help that they have, but we want to make sure that each one of these follow-up pieces, especially the follow-up pieces, really stands on its own. The reason for this is we've all got so much noise coming in, you know, to our text messages, through our social media, to our email inbox, people calling us, that we just don't have time. And so someone might skip your first 3 email newsletters or podcasts, you know, or blog posts, but they may dip into one that sounds interesting because it had a good headline. We don't want to make the mistake of alienating them when they actually tune into our content. So we need to make sure that each of these stands alone. Now, I personally like email newsletters. I've been using them for years, and I still use them to this day. I think they're powerful because you can condense a lot of information into something that's very quick to consume, because we can read a lot faster than we can watch or listen to words. We can get more content in per square inch. You know, if someone spends 10 minutes reading, reading an email newsletter, they might be able to get through 5 or 10 pages. Okay, whereas if someone spends 5 or 10 minutes watching an audio or video, they might be able to get through 1 page, or 1.5 pages of printed material. We can usually read a lot faster than we can watch or listen. So I like email newsletters. I also like video because video has a lot more dimension to it. In other words, when someone watches a video, you can add graphics, you can have you talking so they can see your facial expressions. Human faces are very interesting things to watch to most people. You can also do podcasts. I have several friends that have been very successful with podcasts, and now with all the different ways to do them, it's easier than ever to set them up and do them. Some folks like to do blog posts. You can use whatever format you want. You can have people subscribe to RSS on your website. I happen to be in favor of email newsletters because I still think that they work best for follow-up. But if you're going to use video, you're probably also going to follow up with email and say, hey, I just put up a new video for you. Go and watch it. Okay, so there'll probably be some combination, et cetera, et cetera. Use what you think your customers will respond best to. And if you're in doubt, do a test. Okay, if you're in doubt, do a test. Then, of course, as I just mentioned here, remember what you learned about serializing your content. Okay, comes in very, very handy here when writing newsletters or creating videos. As with serializing your content, choose the few key emotional hot button issues to focus on in your newsletters and other follow-up. Take each of your top hot button issues and your techniques and discuss them from different angles. Okay, great. So what I mean here, and again, we've already learned about serializing here, but what I'm talking about is really figure out what are the top 3, 5, maybe 7 things that every one of your prospects really wants to know about, especially when they're getting started and especially when they don't have much education or knowledge. And then take your very best techniques, the ideas that were the ones that really, they work the best, they get the fastest results, and they're the things that your customers, use and really love, and then keep coming back and hitting on these things over and over and over and over and over. For example, when I was doing a lot of teaching of dating advice, one of the things that I taught men to do was, instead of being kind of pushovers and not really having any spine, to instead be a little bit stronger, be a little bit more aggressive and more fun at the same time. I actually learned from a friend, he called it cocky and funny. And the term really stuck. I really liked it because it wasn't just being arrogant. It was kind of doing it in a fun way, right? Which says not that you're arrogant, but it says that you're kind of fun and you can play different characters and you can have a good time. And it also says that you can tease other people and you can have a good time with them and you're not really intimidated. Okay? Now, I learned that this concept of cocky and funny, not only did it work really well to create some chemistry and attraction with the opposite sex, but it was also something that men latched onto and they went, wow, I tried that and it really worked and I never would have thought of that before. Okay, so I was able to use that in my newsletters all the time. Okay, so a guy would say, I met a girl that I really liked and I bought her flowers and I sent them to her and I said, I think you're really pretty and will you please go on a date with me? And she didn't respond, so I wrote her a 10-page letter and then I dropped it off at her work and I told her that I thought she was really nice and, I wanted to go on a date with her. And so, I would take these kinds of emails from guys and I would make fun of them and I would say, she's never going to feel attraction for you if you do that. Instead, here's what you need to do. And then I would talk about cocky and funny and I would, show it from 10 different perspectives and I'd give different examples. And it was a big hit. Now, I probably had 5, 6, 7 of these different topics that I just kept coming back to over and over and over because they were kind of a bridge between the main questions and problems that my customers had and the techniques that I offered that were solutions that got them the benefits and the outcomes that they want, namely to be able to overcome their fear, approach attractive women, get phone numbers and email addresses, and get dates and get them to become a girlfriend. And because I had this kind of toolbox, and because they resonated so well, I could literally write hundreds of newsletters. And I did. I wrote hundreds of them that revolved around the same basic set of tools and techniques. Now, what it also allowed me to do was create a whole series of products that were also centered around these key techniques, and then have a product on each of them, which ultimately is what you should do as well. So I started out by kind of teaching everything in my first book, and then in kind of my first big back-end product, which is called Advanced Dating Techniques. I then went on to create a series of individual products about the things that guys asked about most and that also I had really good techniques on. So I created an entire course on meeting women and dating online. I created an entire course on body language and flirting. I created an entire course on this thing that I call cocky and funny. The course is called Cocky Comedy. And I created a whole series of these courses, and they all went over very, very well, and all of them continue to sell well to this day. Right? So you find this stuff, of course, by talking to your customers. This is one of the reasons early on why I said it's so important to talk to prospects and customers every single day, because that's where you're going to get the raw material that you're going to use in your product, and then maybe even more importantly, later on in your marketing. It's also important to remember to align your follow-ups for sales. Okay, so remember, each of your follow-up pieces are a part of a narrative conversation, so make sure they all fit together with the way your prospect was introduced to you. Also, make sure that each of your follow-ups is positioned, okay? It's also positioned to lead into a sales conversation so that anyone interested in the topic is automatically offered a way to go deeper, learn more, etc. in your product. Okay, so for example, I wouldn't want to run an advertisement that says, you know, men, are you interested in having longer, shinier hair? And then have them opt in for a newsletter and then send them dating tips. Okay, that probably doesn't make sense. Even the first offer probably doesn't make sense. On the other hand, if I have an advertisement that says 10 dating mistakes that most men make and how to avoid them, okay, now that's a little bit more aligned with what we're talking about here. Then I have a list of the 10 dating mistakes, and inside each of the 10 dating mistakes, I'm actually talking about something that I'm going to hit on later inside of my follow-up series. And then in my follow-up series, I touch on them and then align each of those topics with learning more inside of my product. Well, that makes sense. Okay, that connects. That aligns. Okay, so they all have to align. Back to remembering that for the customer, it's all one long experience of interacting with you. Okay, it's one relationship, and each of the pieces is a part of the conversation. We want to make sure that all of them line up. Create interaction with prospects. So have your prospects help you create content and make your content more interesting by encouraging your prospects to submit stories and questions. Then create newsletters and other content based on their contributions. Okay, great. So if you watched the content video here where I kind of taught more about email newsletters and other follow-up, you learned that I have a few different types of newsletters that I do. Some of the best ones, and I found the best-selling ones to be, where I got great comments, questions, sometimes testimonials from customers, and then I would use those as the basis for a Q&A session where I would allow them to ask a question, and then I would answer it in my newsletter. In some newsletters, I'd answer 10 or 20 of these. Now, this is great because your customers help you create your content. It's easier to answer questions oftentimes than it is to come up with content, you know, right off the bat or off the top of your head. Much easier to answer a question that someone's asked than to sit down and think of a new topic. And it allows you to kind of hammer home your key ideas and give situational answers. Okay, so create interaction with your prospects. Get them to contribute their questions, their stories, etc. Not only will it make your life more easy, but it will also make the content much more interesting. Okay, it's very interesting to listen to two people or more interacting with each other. And if you know, if you do a good job at this, the whole group gets involved. Everyone starts making comments, everyone starts having the conversation, and it becomes really fun. Keep following up. Okay, if I haven't said it enough, keep following up. You'll find that people will buy from you months and even years after they visit your site if you continue to follow up. And remember that life is a continual moving parade. Okay? Life is a continual moving parade. Keep following up. The more you follow up, the better. If you create a nice long series of newsletters and you don't know what to put at the end, you know, let's say that you write a series of 50 newsletters and you say, I don't have ideas for anything else. You can put the 50 back in a loop. So after someone gets finished with number 50, they go back to number 1. Maybe create a different series of subject lines, you know, and change it around a little bit. The point here is that, you know, a year later or 6 months later or however often you're mailing your follow-up newsletters, it's very likely that the person will open up a newsletter that they didn't open up last time. Or maybe they opened up and skimmed it and it didn't make sense to them. Or maybe they haven't been reading them and now they're going to start reading them, that kind of thing. So, you know, keep following up. You'll find money will come out of your list years later. I have this happening, you know, essentially every day in my own world. And finally, a nice mindset is follow-up sequences are assets in your business. So every piece of follow-up content that you create becomes an asset in your business, okay, an asset. Each part of your sequence becomes a piece of the machine that makes sales and profit for you. So just remember, every time you're creating a follow-up newsletter, a video, a podcast, whatever it is that's following up, it becomes an asset, something that you can use over and over and over, and something that literally makes your business worth more. Because now every prospect that comes to your website and signs up for your list is now going to get one more follow-up, and that increases the value of your list. It increases how much money you're going to make from each prospect on average. And so it makes your business more profitable, and it makes your business more valuable. So keep creating them. I've literally created hundreds of email newsletters. I've created tons of videos and other types of follow-up content. And I can tell you that the more content I create, the more assets I have, and the more money my business makes.